A boy is dragged through a marketplace in chains. Buyers circle him, inspecting his teeth, his arms, his eyes. One merchant looks closer and sees a flaw, a strange pale mark in one eye, and turns away in disgust. Rejected, too damaged to be worth a fair price. That boy would grow up to shatter the myth that the Mongol Empire could never be defeated. He would burn Crusader fortresses to the ground, outmaneuver kings, and build one of the most feared armies on earth. Popes would write about him with dread. Enemies would whisper his name like a curse. He had no kingdom, no family name, no birthright, only a scar, a sword, and an unbreakable will. This is the story of a boy nobody wanted, and the empire he built from nothing. Our story begins far from palaces and thrones, on the wide grasslands of the Eurasian steppe, somewhere in what is now southern Russia or Crimea. Here, a boy was born into the Kipchak Turks, a nomadic people who lived on horseback, hunted with bows, and measured wealth in herds, not gold. His name was Baybars, and in the world he was born into, life was hard, but it was his own. That world ended in violence. Mongol raiders swept across the steppe, shattering tribes, burning camps, and taking captives. Baybars, still a boy, was seized and ripped away from everything he knew. He became cargo, a body to be sold. He was marched through slave markets, one after another, treated like livestock. And then came the moment that should have destroyed him. A merchant in Damascus looked into his eye and saw a defect, a cataract, a strange discoloration, and refused to buy him. Rejected, cast aside as damaged goods. Imagine that feeling, stripped of your home, your family, your freedom, and then told that even as a slave, you're not good enough. Eventually, Baybars was sold to a lesser merchant and transported into Egypt, into the hands of an emir named Ayubi. And there, his life took a turn that history could never have predicted. Ayubi didn't see a broken boy. He saw a rare and dangerous kind of survivor. Baybars was enrolled into a brutal, highly disciplined military training system, the Mamluk system, where slave boys were transformed into elite soldiers. Every day was a test. Archery until his arms burned. Horsemanship until he could guide a war horse with only his knees. Sword drills until his hands bled. Mamluk training didn't just build soldiers, it built survivors. Men with nothing to lose and everything to prove. Baybars had already lost his home. He had already lost his freedom. Now, on the training fields of Egypt, he had one thing left to lose: his life. And he refused to lose that too. Something was stirring in this rejected boy. Nobody watching him in that slave market could have imagined what he was about to become. Years passed, and the boy who was once too flawed to buy became something else entirely: a weapon. Baybars didn't just meet the standard of Mamluk training, he exceeded it. His archery was precise. His command of a horse was almost unnatural. But what truly set him apart wasn't just physical skill, it was his mind. He studied his enemies. He noticed patterns in battle. He remembered terrain, formations, timing. While other soldiers fought with raw aggression, Baybars fought with calculation. He was patient, controlled, always thinking 2 moves ahead. His commanders noticed. In an army built entirely on merit, where a former slave could rise higher than a nobleman if he was skilled enough, Baybars began climbing fast. He was given more responsibility, more trust, more soldiers under his command. and he needed every bit of that skill. Because the world outside Egypt's training grounds was descending into chaos. A new enemy was rising in the east, one so terrifying that entire nations surrendered without a fight, simply to avoid its wrath. The Mongols were coming, and nothing in the known world had ever stopped them. The Mongol Nightmare. To understand what Baybars was about to face, you have to understand the terror the Mongols had already unleashed. By the 1250s, the Mongol Empire was the largest continuous land empire in human history. Genghis Khan's descendants had crushed China, shattered Persia, and torn through Russia and Eastern Europe. Entire cities that resisted were wiped from the map, their populations slaughtered, their libraries burned, their monuments reduced to ash. Baghdad, the glittering heart of Islamic civilization, home to scholars, poets, and centuries of accumulated knowledge, fell to the Mongols in 1258. The reports that followed were almost too horrifying to believe. The caliph was killed. Hundreds of thousands of people were slaughtered in the streets. The Tigris River, according to witnesses, ran black with ink from the destroyed libraries and red with blood. Panic spread across the Middle East like wildfire. Rulers who had never lost a war began abandoning their cities before the Mongols even arrived. Refugees flooded into Egypt, telling stories of unstoppable horsemen, of cities turned to graveyards, of a force that treated mercy as weakness. The message was clear. Resist, and you will be annihilated. Surrender, and you might survive as a slave. For years, this was the reality of the Islamic world. Not a question of if the Mongols would come, but when. And when Mongol messengers arrived in Cairo, carrying an ultimatum, demanding total surrender or complete destruction, it seemed like Egypt's fate was already sealed. But someone in Cairo had a different idea. Someone who had been rejected once before and refused to be broken again. The Battle of Ain Jalut. In September 1260, near a valley in Palestine called Ain Jalut, the spring of Goliath, history reached its breaking point. The Mamluk army marched out to meet the Mongols, and every soldier in that formation understood the weight of what they carried. If they lost here, there would be nothing left to stop the Mongols from rolling straight into Egypt, the last major stronghold of the Islamic world. Baybars, now a senior commander, had studied the Mongols for years. He knew their reputation, their brutal efficiency, and more importantly, their favorite trick, the feigned retreat. Lure your enemy into a chase, break their formation, then turn and destroy them. So Baybars decided to use their own tactic against them. He led a small vanguard force directly at the Mongol army, provoking them into battle. Then, at the right moment, his men turned and fled, appearing to break in panic. To the Mongols, this looked like an easy kill, a retreating enemy, ripe for slaughter. They gave chase, thundering across the valley in pursuit, confident and unrestrained. They were riding straight into a trap. Hidden in the hills and forests surrounding the valley, the main Mamluk force waited in silence. As the Mongols surged forward, overextended and scattered, the trap closed. Mamluk soldiers emerged from concealment on both flanks, cutting off any retreat. The battlefield exploded into chaos. Arrows tore through the air. Steel met steel. Horses screamed. For the first time in living memory, the Mongols were the ones being surrounded, not surrounding others. The fighting was brutal and desperate. At one critical point, the Mamluk lines nearly buckled, and it seemed the battle could still slip away. But the Sultan at the time, Qutuz, rallied the wavering troops with a legendary cry for the faith and the cause they were fighting for, and the line held. Slowly, the tide turned completely. The Mongol commander, Kitbuka, was captured and executed. His army, the supposedly unstoppable Mongol war machine, was crushed and scattered. For the first time in history, the Mongols had suffered a decisive, undeniable defeat. The myth of their invincibility was broken, shattered on the plains of Ain Jalut by an army led, in large part, by a man once rejected in a slave market for having a damaged eye. The Islamic world had been saved. But the story of Baybars was far from over. In fact, the most dramatic turn was still to come.